All
Yeah,
right,
no.
let's call benefits and services to order. Do we have to roll, please?
Treasurer Chung. Ms. Ortega, representing the Director of Finance. Ms. Higa. Ms. Hendricks. Mr. Rosenstiel, not there. And Controller Yi. Chairperson Dillon, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. You all should have received at your seats a new item number 2. We had some changes that came out to us on, today's Wednesday, right? On Monday. And this item 2 reflects the changes that went out on Monday. So I hope you all received those and will be operating from those, correct, Ed, Peggy,
Right.
Rick?
Yes.
All righty. So our first item on our agenda is approval of the committee agenda and work plan.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That has been approved. So let's go right into it, Rick. We don't want to keep you away from court too long.
Madam Chair, good afternoon, members of the committee. So annually, we adopt different interest rates for the three main programs, and we adopt permissive service and lump sum death benefits. In the past, we've taken each one separately. Is that the pleasure of the chair? Okay, so we do the regular interest rate, which is just the actual assumed rate. That's the rate we charge members for when they pay on time for credit, and then we also charge penalty and interest on that, on late contribution reporting. I'm open for questions.
Right, does anyone have any questions on the write-up on item 2? You can see that the changes are to the recommended contribution rates for elected officials, employee organizations, and the reduced workload program, which we are going to look at next. Right?
Yep.
Are we gonna vote on them separately, or you wanna wait for?
I think, let's go ahead and do it separately.
Okay, so the regular interest rate.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Alrighty. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion passes. That
Okay.
was the resolution on benefits and services 9.
So the next is the credited interest rate. That's the rate we credit the contributions that employees make to the system. It's based on 2-year treasuries. We are recommending, as you see, it's 0.49%, which is extremely low, but it represents what the passbook and what the treasury, 2-year treasuries rates are. I'm open for questions, and I recommend that the committee adopt this rate for 2015-16.
And that resolution's on benefits and services 11. Dana has moved adoption. John has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion is passed. Rick?
Item C, the minimum interest rate for the cash balance benefit program. Now, that's the rate that we credit employers' contributions. So it's their entire account. And this is the amount we're proposing to credit for fiscal year 15-16. We're recommending 3.15%. It's based on the 30-year treasury. And so that's quite a bit higher than the 2-year treasury. You can see the difference there. So we're open for questions. Staff recommends that the committee adopt that interest rate for 15-16.
All right, any questions? Arena's moved adoption. John has seconded. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
So likewise, the minimum interest rate for the defined benefit supplement program, very similar to the cash balance program. It's also based on 30-year treasury, so it's 3.15%. And the staff is recommending that the committee adopt this rate for fiscal year 15-16.
I move adoption of the resolution.
Arena has moved. John has seconded. Is there any further discussion? And I'll make sure I call for abstentions this time. I wasn't calling for abstentions, just in case anybody wants to. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? And were there any abstentions on the previous items? Already? The DBS has been approved?
Okay, so items E is the employer contribution rate for elected officials of employee organizations. So this is when members of the plan are serving in the capacity of an elected official. Part of their salary is paid by that organization, but they get full benefits under the plan, and so the employer has to pay those contributions. And it's generally what the normal cost is minus what the employee or the employer would otherwise pay. That's the additional amount that they pay. And the minimum is what they would pay anyway. And so because the contribution rates for employers have changed under AB 1469, this amount will change and it will be 10.73%. That will be what the employer will pay next fiscal year. So that is greater than the normal cost minus the member's contribution, which is the other criteria. So staff is recommending that the committee adopt 10.73% for the contribution rate for employers.
Any questions?
I'll move adoption of the resolution.
Arena has moved. Second? Anybody?
Second.
Alrighty, and Joy has seconded. We adopt that. Great. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? That has been approved.
So item F is the contribution rate for the reduced workload program. The reduced workload program is in effect for members who are transitioning into retirement. So they would work part-time, and so they would be paid not a full salary, but they would receive full pension benefits. So the employer has to pay the difference between what the cost of the program is, or the plan is, minus what the member would pay. And the minimum, again, is what they would ordinarily pay anyway without this program. So it's 10.73% is what the employers will pay in 15-16. So again, staff is recommending that the committee adopt that rate for employers under this program.
All right, any questions? Entertain a motion. Arena has moved.
Second.
Joy has seconded. Is there any further questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All righty.
Okay, item G, the permissive service contribution rates for the defined benefit program. Again, members are allowed to purchase certain service under the defined benefit program, and we set contribution rates. We set it by age, so each age has their own rate that they pay. It's a percentage of salary. There's a chart, attachment 7 being S25. Under age 28 and above 73, there's so few purchases that it doesn't really make sense to set individual rates for those ages. But the other ages, we have the rates as you see. They're pretty close to last year. There have been a few changes. We do have 2% at 62 rates. I can tell you there have been so few purchases, we've had to do like a theoretical number. It hasn't been based on purchases that have occurred. I think we've had maybe 5. So we don't really have any real history on that yet. But the 2% at 60, we've had years of experience, and so those rates are based on actual experience that we've had. Like I say, most of them are pretty close to last year. They're off just a difference is just a small amount. So staff is recommending the committee adopt these rates for fiscal year 15-16.
And that resolution is on page 32. Entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Arena has moved and Joy has seconded. Are there any further questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, moving right along.
So
Rick, we go to the death benefit.
finally, the death benefit. So the death benefit is to pay to active and retired members. The purchase is to help them with final expenses, whether it's just burial, cremation, or whatever. The board has been authorized by statute that they can raise that benefit, to deal with inflation. There hasn't been an increase since, I believe, 2002. 2002. And so primarily because the actuary did not recommend increases because we didn't have sufficient funding to take care of the unfunded that the main program had. So this year, since we've secured additional funding, the actuary has not made a recommendation. And so the actuary, what we've done is we've given the cost of the full increase with inflation and then various other increases, 1%, half of that. And that is on BNS 36. So there's a full increase, which means to bring it up with inflation from 2002 to 2015. There's a 1% increase in the benefit of 1.4% increase, and then there's a 17.3% increase. And it shows you that the various costs. So the most expensive is about $238 million in total. A 1% increase is about $6 million. And the reason why we did 1% is if you want to do 2%, it's about double. If you want to do 5%, it's about 5 times that. So you can scale about what the cost of any increase is.
But again, Rick, no action's required.
No
You're just
action's
giving them
required.
alternatives to consider.
Right. So these are alternatives if you wish to do that. But you do not, as in the past, you're not required to increase the death benefits.
All right, I'd like to open it up for discussion. Harry?
I think I just missed that a little bit. Just real simply, the death benefit hasn't been adjusted since 2002.
2002 is the last
And
time.
Is staff recommending an increase? No.
Staff is not making a recommendation.
Ed?
Yeah,
Well-
this is sort of one of those situations that we run into where it's sort of, it largely requires some discussion on the part of the committee of what they see the purpose of the death benefit to be. And that's why we sort of provide information about, it could be used, I mean, the law doesn't say what it's for, it's just paid, but you can conceptually think of it's to cover the cost of burial, cremation, and that would suggest one approach, or it'd be the cost of, that the family bears for the end-of-life medical costs, and that would suggest a different approach. It might be the kind of thing that it warrants, just like all the other rates and contributions are now set in a board policy, it might be good to have a policy about what the purpose of the death benefit is, and that would help drive the discussion. But in the meantime, it just sort of, what is it you see conceptually the purpose of the death benefit to be for, and that would help.
So that, to that point, I would like to suggest that at some appropriate time in the near future, we explore that from a policy perspective. I think it's worthy of exploration. It is a level of benefit that's due our membership. It hasn't been really, it has not been adjusted in 13 years. Not saying it should be, but I think your point, Ed, is spot on. What is it for? And once we make that determination, we can then make a decision on whether or not there should be an adjustment in what that benefit is. So if we could get that agendized for an appropriate time to
Sure.
discuss that?
Pleasure of the committee.
I agree.
Okay. Paul?
So my question has to do with AB 1469, and if there's any interplay between our previous authority under statute, which still exists, and AB 1469. And the reason I raise it is because I think in another place in our 3 days of meetings, we're going to be talking about the Medicare program, and I think there it was said that if we were to increase the benefits, that would require going to the legislature to get authority, because the 1469 doesn't allow this board essentially to increase the unfunded liability without approval of. So I'm just trying to understand. Is there an interplay here?
No, the issue with the Medicare program is that under the way that the language provides the authority to the board to extend the Medicare program, it's to be used with funds, the surplus funds. But given the way that AB 1469 was enacted, there is no such thing as surplus funds.
I see.
Whatever is surplus actually comes in the form of reduced contributions paid by the state or the employer at some point in the future. So that's what would require legislative change.
I see. So this would just be using funds.
This is just using
I mean,
funds.
we would be expanding benefits from what they are now. We would.
Correct.
We would affect therefore the funded status
Yes.
of the program, but that's not
But that's authorized under the
We can do
statute.
that if that's what
Yes.
we want to do. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, I wanted to drill down on that same point Paul's raising, because I don't quite track that logic, given that there's an unfunded liability with respect to this program, and whether that isn't basically a drain on the plan that the legislature agreed to fund in an indirect way.
Well, I was, oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, sure, I mean, it's more money if you increase the death benefit. So in a way, it does increase the unfunded, the entire program, unless you get additional funding to take care of it.
Right. So there is an interplay with 1469.
Not necessarily 1469, but there's interplay with the unfunded. So,
There's nothing in 1469 that would preclude you from increasing the death benefit. You have authority to increase the death benefit. It does have an effect on the unfunded liability, which would ultimately affect what the contribution rates that the employer in the state pays, or actually what the
It would be
employer
more
pays.
in the nature of, this is a little thing that the legislature may or may not have been aware of when they, approved the funding plan.
Well, we didn't, I mean, certainly the projections of our liabilities would not have included future increases in the death benefit, I don't think.
it did not.
Yeah, it would not. So it would be on top of it. And it would be, given the fact it's an increase in the benefits beyond the 1990 benefit level, it would affect the employer's contribution rate.
Yeah.
Up to a certain point.
I think we had a similar conversation, but I think the actuaries suggested at least a actuarial way past this when we talked about the discretionary credits last meeting. And I have the same reservation there, but okay.
Right.
think
I
we
mean,
need-
the situation is clearly different. I mean, with respect to this particular benefit, we're clearly in a different place than we were up until now with the unfunded, because we actually have a funding plan in place. But this does add to this will contribute to the unfunded liability if you make an adjustment to the benefit.
And I think in the past, what the actuaries recommended is that we don't increase it unless we secure additional funding. So it wasn't a strict recommendation against increasing the death benefit.
When there wasn't a plan to amortize
Right.
the unfunded.
Right.
Anything else? Rick, I don't have any questions. The request to have this brought forward is a discussion around policy, where we want to go. Will you please include the historical numbers also? You've given us what burial costs are, cremation costs, but at one time, this death benefit actually did cover some of those. So if we could have that, how far back that actually was,
Okay.
because I think the last time it was increased, it actually increased enough to cover burial costs. I think it's always covered cremation costs, but
Yeah.
and that could be part of the information that we have when we have that discussion.
Okay.
Are there any further questions on this item? Alrighty,
Can I actually,
go ahead, Sharon.
just to clarify what you're saying there? So my understanding is the suggestion to bring this forth as a policy conversation is to really discuss what's the intent of this benefit, right? So it's been used, as burial costs or things like that, but there would be exploration as to, like, the board would have a conversation around, what this benefit is for. Is that the conversation? I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
so I just wanted to clarify, because I guess I'm just trying to understand where we've been and then kind of where we're going. Because I think the conversations over here about the unfunded are critical, and also keeping in mind our members and thinking about, inflation
Peggy.
over the last 13 years.
I think it's important to note that the member has the opportunity to designate whoever she or he wishes as the recipient of this money. And it may or may not be whoever is financially responsible for the burial of the individual. So the direct linkage to pay for burial costs needs to be severed. That isn't a direct linkage. I mean, many families may choose to do that, but so when you're thinking about this, I would think more broadly.
Hardy? Thank you, Rick.
Sure.
So just to be, so we'll bring this back. We may be able to bring it back in June. If not, certainly by September. And I guess the question is, once you sort of settle on a policy, I don't see any legal problem with adopting whatever adjustments you decide to make in response to the
Whenever we
policy
do.
going forward.
Alrighty. God, I wanted to add something else to it. The difference between A and B, let's make sure we talk about that also when we have that discussion. The historical significance of that. Alrighty. Thanks. Oh, Tom?
Yeah, when you bring it back, I would appreciate an explicit legal analysis on the unfunded liability point.
Okay.
Alrighty. Moving on, status of the Medicare premium payment program.
Hey, Rick can go back to jail.
Have fun.
So the committee asked for sort of an update on where things were with respect to the Medicare premium payment program. And this is a program that was established back in 2000 that pays the Medicare Part A, which is for hospitalization, the premium for those people who didn't qualify for Medicare based on their own employment, either in other circumstances or having participated in Medicare as a CalSTRS member or being married to somebody who participated in Medicare. We have a declining population because up until 1986, just like teachers are not in Social Security up until 1986, people weren't in Medicare as well. Now, people who were hired in their employment after 1986 are participated in Medicare. So as I said, this is sort of a declining population, but we had a population of people that, because of when they were working, they never qualified for Medicare on their own, and they weren't married to somebody who had Medicare. So one of the benefits that was established back in 2000 was to pay that premium for that group. And under the legislation, the legislature gave the authority to the board to extend that program to people who retire beyond the 2000 date, so that you could sort of monitor the cost of the program and extend the benefit as appropriate. But it had to be extended, it had to be paid for from assets that were surplus to what was needed to fully fund the DB program over the funding period established by the board. So once we got in a situation where, so the board had over a period of time had extended the benefit to apply to people who retired prior to July 1, 2012. But at that point, it was clear that there were no surplus assets and there was no reading of the law that would suggest that the board could extend it any further. So it stayed at that point. So unless you retired before July 1, 2012 and met other conditions, the program didn't apply. So now that we've got a program to fully fund the program, the committee asked for an update on the status of the program and where things are. And in the analysis, we talk about what it would take to extend the program in certain increments, either 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or basically covering everybody who otherwise would not be eligible for Part A coverage. And as we indicate on page, it's in Milliman's analysis, but it's also summarized on page BNS 55. It shows those estimates where the best estimate of the cost is anywhere, depending upon how far you extend it, anywhere from $13 million to a little under $75 million to extend the benefit further. Clearly the benefit affected fewer people than what we initially anticipated because we had no visibility of how many people were married to those who qualified for Medicare on their own, and therefore the member's spouse could pick it up. So that's why it's much less expensive than we thought, but there is a cost associated with it. The two issues associated with extending the benefit is, as we just discussed in the prior item, is that under the law, the program is to be funded from assets that are surplus to the DB program beyond what's needed to fully fund it over the funding period, which under AB 1469 is beyond 2046. And And as I just mentioned, the way that 1469 is drafted, whatever assets are needed beyond what's funded to fully fund it by 2046 actually results in a reduced contribution rate either by the state or by the employer. So those surplus assets, more than likely, unless investments do extraordinarily well, would never exist. So you wouldn't actually have those assets. So you would need to change the statutory basis upon which to extend the benefit if that was something the board wanted to consider. I think the other more practical consideration is that even though we clearly the fund did much better last year than what we assumed in our investments, we're only 1 year into the funding program, and it's really too soon to suggest that you want to take on additional liability as relatively small as this is until we have a better sense of sort of what the long-term funding structure is. So this is really just for your information. You're not, there's no action that was before the committee, but we want to at least provide you the information about what it would mean, how many people would be affected by it, and what it would cost if you did want to extend the benefit further. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So I have no one in queue. I do have a couple questions, Ed. Some of the districts that did not have the selection election didn't do so because they had lifetime health benefits for their retirees. That's not necessarily the case any longer.
Mm-hmm.
If they held a selection election now, can they hold one now?
Sure.
So if they held one now, does that have any bearing on someone that might have retired from that district prior to 2012?
No, because
who
they-
might not any longer have full-time, fully paid health benefits from that district?
I'd have to go back and look at statute. The part of the problem is that depending on how old the member was at the time, they would have had voted to participate in Medicare. And if they're no longer working there because they've already retired, they wouldn't have that opportunity. If somebody was past that age, which is probably more likely, I'd have to go back and look to see whether or not they actually have to be working for that district at the time the election was held. So I couldn't answer that. But it wouldn't affect anything unless it got extended anyway. Well, I'm sorry, you're talking about somebody who retired before 2012.
Yeah, that's
I'd
somebody
have to
that
go
might
back
be
and look.
eligible, but their
Yeah.
district never had
Yeah,
the selection election.
right.
I'd appreciate it if
Sure,
we could just,
we'll look at that, and we'll
and
check
it
that out
doesn't
and let you
necessarily
know.
have to be, you can bring it back in a
Yeah.
DCIO or DCO report or
Yep.
whatever. Alrighty, and then, age 65 for Medicare, correct?
Mhm.
Alrighty. I think that's it. Is there anyone else? Alrighty, Ed, thank you very much for the information. I know that our constituency groups definitely wanted an update on that. Going on with the Member Service Center?
Okay, so joining me at the dais will be Andrew Roth, the Director of our Client Outreach and Guidance Division. And we're happy to share with you some of the good things that we've been doing relative to the development of and the members' experience with our member service centers.
Hi, thank you very much for your time and attention today. In response to questions about the site selection process for the member service centers and some general usage information, we put together some material. So rather than read the slides, I'll just speak to the content. On the first slide is sort of a history of the board's authorization of the Member Service Center initiative, as well as I wanted to take the opportunity to say that our previous counseling experience at the CalSTRS location on Folsom Boulevard helped drive the creation of our first Member Service Center here at the headquarters building in West Sacramento. The West Sacramento Member Service Center at headquarters has subsequently served as the model for the look and feel of the other member service centers throughout California. Approval of the Member Service Center initiative kicked in a shifting business model in terms of our benefits counseling service delivery, specifically moving from a model that utilized contracted employees working out of contracted space, typically in a county office of education, to a model that uses state employees working in CalSTRS operated facilities. And for kind of a an example of what that looks like in terms of numbers. In the 10-11 fiscal year, Client Outreach and Guidance had about 60 contracted counselors and 11 state staff providing counseling services. By the end of the 16-17 fiscal year, we anticipate that we'll have about 3 contract staff, largely in the most rural and remote areas of the state, and 55 state staff providing those counseling services. By way of comparison, today we have approximately 39 state staff and 18 contract staff. Also wanted to point out that these figures aren't specifically FTEs. These are the number of people that we have conducting counseling. We do hire some part-time employees to be able to adjust for peak demand and the cyclical demand of our business. I also wanted to take this opportunity to mention group sessions, as there was some initial apprehension on the part of members going into group sessions. However, our experience from the satisfaction surveys has indicated that members rate group sessions as highly as they do individual sessions. We think this is because members in a group setting have the opportunity to hear their peers ask questions that they might not have thought of, so they tend to get more information out of the group session interaction. Also, channeling members into group sessions allows for a little bit more capacity and flexibility with regards to utilizing outreach opportunities.
That's my understanding, even after a group session, there's still an opportunity for a little bit of one-on-one at the very end?
Yes, thank you. Typically, at the end of the session, the counselor will say, if you have any questions, I'm going to hang out, stick around for a little extra, and so members do have the opportunity to interact one-on-one.
Cool.
The initial Member Service Center locations, as approved by the board, are as depicted on the slide. In 2013, Client Outreach and Guidance recommended a shift in those locations. The shift was based on the population and concentration of members. Specifically, there are more members in the Inland Empire area than there are in the area immediately surrounding Fresno. In the Inland Empire member demographics, with members being clustered in the southwestern portion of that region, make it a little bit easier for CalSTRS to deliver services from one centralized location than in the Central Valley, which is a much larger area, where members are more spread out in terms of the concentration of cities. Also, while Fresno was the initial location of the CalSTRS Business Resumption Center, that justification shifted when CalSTRS selected another location some years ago to serve as the Business Resumption Center.
Sharon, go ahead.
Andrew, you might be getting there, but I was just kind of curious. So and that shift makes sense in terms of, we want to be located where the most members are. What are we doing in some of these, in the gray areas and all the, like, obviously Northern California in general beyond Sacramento is, so how do we meet those members' needs up there or in the gray?
So currently, for areas such as Northern California or the Central Valley that don't have their own member service center, we are serving those areas through a combination of the member service center doing outreach and field offices. For example, the contracted staff that I referred to, we have those stationed typically at a county office of education who are able to provide services to members in a larger, more dispersed geographic area. We're still looking at the best staffing model going forward. There's more work to do with our service regions. Right now, we're engaged in an effort to break the state up into service regions and develop a longer-term strategy based on the member service centers.
And if I might add, it has long been my dream that we perfect our use of technology to
Yes,
provide
absolutely.
interactive counseling opportunities with members beyond what we can do on the telephone right now, so that we have verbal or visual as well
Skyping.
as
We could have
verbal
Skyping counseling.
interaction with them. We're not quite ready for that at this point. We certainly are looking at technologies available and anticipate that that will provide a much-needed level of service for individuals in remote areas who may otherwise spend hours traveling to visit even one of our
Remote areas.
more remote locations. So It'll save staff travel time, it'll save it'll be more convenient for members. There are obviously issues that we have to resolve. We want to make sure that that's done through a secured channel. We want to make sure that the quality of the connectivity is good. We've looked at models that some other states do where they actually provide stations that members can go to. So there is a room that has a direct connection to CalSTRS. I think I'm a little leery of someone sitting at a Starbucks talking about all of their personal finance information we have no idea of who might be listening in. So we want to make sure that it's a safe environment for our members as well.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that, because I think that to me makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Peggy, in some of our remote districts, they're already doing a lot of long-distance learning things, and some of them have some really sophisticated setups. And it's beyond my technology. We'd have to have a Shisha here to probably talk about it all. But some of them are really well done, and it might be, I suggest a field trip.
Well, that could be fun. We're also, I've been watching the telemedicine movement where individuals from very remote areas are able to communicate effectively with highly paid specialists who won't take the 2 days of travel time to visit a remote location, but are able to take an hour of consultation time in order to meet a patient's medical needs. And so there are many models out there. We just have not had time to actually focus on. We've been really working on developing our full MSC infrastructure before we move in that direction.
Right. And because I'm thinking, there's whole classes being taught at high schools, for advanced classes that they just can't do within the population that they have in the communities that they're located. So we could even do group sessions if we could hook into some of that technology that's already existing. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, distance learning is definitely on our radar. We're having internal conversations about that. So in terms of the final member service center locations and the order in which we will deploy them, that information is on the slide in front of you. The committee also asked for some usage statistics for our member service centers. Glendale is the first member service center outside of headquarters to open. We have 2 complete years of fiscal years of information. In terms of the breakdown of that information, in 12-13, we saw approximately 1,650 members individually, approximately 2,500 members via group, just over 3,000 members in workshops, and just over 2,000 members were counter contacts. We define counter contacts as walk-ins. Typically, those are members who come in for forms review, form submission, and to ask questions. In 13-14, Glendale saw more business with about 3,400 members being seen individually, 1,300 seen in groups, a little over 700 in workshops, 1,300 in outreach, and just under 2,600 as counter contacts. The Santa Clara Member Service Center opened in June of 2013, so we have only 1 complete fiscal year of data. The Santa Clara Center saw just under 4,000 members, of which 1,500, a little over 1,500 were in individuals, 1,160 in groups, just over 300 in workshops, 20 outreach contacts, and 900 members came in via the counter. So we experience a fair amount of business with walk-ins, which is great. Mm-hmm. After the Member Service Center opened in Santa Clara, Client Outreach and Guidance took the opportunity to conduct a lessons learned process to see how we could enhance the site search selection, and developed a slightly more formal demographic analysis along with a member survey of both active and retired members. The more formal process includes the voices of the members, which is something that we thought was an important element in ensuring that the selected location would work for the membership. I'd like to walk you through our demographic analysis and member survey. The demographic analysis contains the criteria you see in front of you. The member survey contains the questions that you see in front of you. I want to apologize for the small font of the slides you're about to see. We weren't able to blow them up sufficiently for PowerPoint purposes, so I will speak to them in general. In terms of the two demographic analyses that I'll walk you through, the first one was Orange County. That's our Irvine Member Service Center that opened in June of 2014. So the demographic analysis looks at where the members live. The colored areas are the largest member communities in Orange County. The tiny font is the breakdown of age groups. Then we looked at transportation. How would members get to and from these large communities, looking at highways, freeways, and airports. Then we took into account the largest employers in the region. So you'll see the 7 largest school districts in Orange County laid on top of the communities where members live and the transportation network. Crime is something that's important to us for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that members typically come see us after work when it's dark. So member safety and employee safety were both of concern. So we looked at the crime rates in the Orange County area. The darker the hue, the safer the area. The darkest hue, of course, is where there's nobody living. That area to the right of the map is the Santa Ana Mountains. The rest of the county is, varying shades of blue, which we took into account when locating that final center, selecting the final location, And then we also look at the proximity to the Glendale Member Service Center. So what the small fonts in the enclosed box is each of the top cities in terms of member location and the distance of that city to the Glendale Member Service Center.
Mileage doesn't mean anything in Los Angeles, right? It's all about drive time.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. When it takes
That
2
was a little bit
hours to go
harder.
15 miles, yeah.
And then we took those 5 largest communities and included them in the member survey where we asked that series of questions for the members. Irvine, Orange, Anaheim, Huntington Beach, and Fullerton. As you can see by the 6 to 7 rating on the 7-point scale, members selected Irvine by a significant margin as the location they would be most likely to visit. So we, in turn, based on all of the information that we've gathered, collected, and analyzed, determined that the Orange County Member Service Center should be located in Irvine. Then, in terms of the use of Irvine, again, we don't have a complete fiscal year of data. However, we are on track based on halfway through the fiscal year information to significantly exceed the number of members seen through the Orange County Contract Office, as you can see by the numbers on the slide. And I have a note that we have a fair amount of counter contacts, which to me indicates that we selected an appropriate location in terms of the convenience for members to access our services. I want to walk you quickly through the Inland Empire demographic analysis. The Inland Empire is a larger region than Orange County, and so we have a number of cities, the majority of which are clustered in that where the San Bernardino and Riverside counties meet. We then looked at transportation to see the network available to members for commuting to and from the centers. Looked also at the largest employers in the Inland Empire.
North on Front Street toward K Street. Then
Sorry.
turn right onto K Street.
She's trying to get the distance from one service center
Yes.
to the other, right, Dana?
I am. I'm sorry, Andrew.
Okay, and moving to the crime. Again, the high desert is the safest place in the Inland Empire, and looking at the more urban areas, there are some pockets of lower crime. We also, in this analysis, decided to include affordability. This is based on lessons learned from previous member service centers. It's important for CalSTRS to be able to attract and retain talented staff. And so taking into consideration the affordability of housing in the area around our member service center is helpful.
Andrew, I can't see all the.
And so the darker the hue, the more expensive the cost of living.
I'm just curious, I can't see is it Rancho Cucamonga? What are the dark areas?
So the darkest areas
read it, I'm sorry.
are the most expensive in
Right.
terms of housing.
I just can't read the names of the cities though. What are the areas that are darker?
Rancho Cucamonga would be among the most
Okay,
expensive.
I'm just trying to
Yes.
read them. What's the other one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Rancho Cucamonga, Corona, Temecula,
Oh,
Really?
Murrieta, Redlands were the highest cost.
Wine country now.
That's
It's all
true.
wine country.
And I can make available a hard copy for you, or a soft copy so you can. Yeah,
I love
sure.
this stuff, so, yeah.
And then finally, the proximity to other member service centers. I really like how we were able to visually depict in this next go-round of the report. The blue circle is a 50-mile radius around each one of the existing member service centers. As you can see, there's very little overlap. The overlap that occurs between Riverside and Irvine is, again, the Santa Ana Mountains, where there's very few members living. So based on the member survey that was conducted after we identified the largest member communities in the Inland Empire, members selected Rancho Cucamonga and Riverside as the most desirable locations. We selected Riverside because active members preferred Riverside by a very slight margin. And the other advantage to Riverside is that it's further to the east. So from that member radius demographic, or from that visual that you just saw, it's not too close. There's not as much overlap between Riverside and Glendale. And this is an image of the Riverside Member Service Center, which is on track to open in July of 2015. And we are underway with the demographic analysis and member survey process for the San Diego Member Service Center. Are there any questions?
Andrew,
that
I'm
I
just
can
going to add
answer?
one thing. Actually, you asked for this report today, but you were kind of wondering how did we come up with these places, and so we did this at your request. But I think it is good to show that it isn't just looking at real estate and saying, hey, this looks like an interesting office building to be in. It was really based on a lot of sound research, and Andrew partnered with another part of the organization that does our strategy research and survey research and analysis. So it was, I thought, a really good effort of bringing in a lot of data and debating, and there's a lot of debate around a couple of these where the best place to be is. So good work there.
Thank you.
Very good work.
Rich?
Just a quick question. For comparison purposes, how many people do we have coming in here?
How many people?
Come into the West Sacramento office.
Coming to STIRS here in headquarters?
I believe it's somewhere around 5,000 to 6,000 members. North of that, I'm seeing from the audience. Number of members in West Sacramento?
In West Sacramento itself, in the county of Viola, it's 1,400 active, and in Sacramento.
Mike, I think he's meaning.
They
How
come
many-
actually.
How
to
many
the
come and
service
use the
center.
the facility here?
Hang on one second.
We keep track of
Okay.
this stuff.
For the first,
You want last year's full numbers?
you've got last year's full numbers, and I've got the first half of this year.
So last fiscal year's full numbers, we saw in West Sacramento, this includes all of our services, including the counter contacts and outreach was just over 6,500.
And we're at about 3,600 at the end of Q2 for this year.
Wow,
Q3
36.
ends today, which is peak season, so
So
we're interested in
we're
that
seeing more
number.
people in Glendale, though, right? Which
Correct.
is what I was, these centers are actually working there. Seeing this
Yes.
is very good. Okay, great, thank you.
And I think it brings our members a lot of comfort to be able to actually interact with
Yeah.
somebody that is our employee.
Yeah.
All right, Sharon.
I did want to, I always joke that I live in Eagle Rock, so I'm 5 minutes from Glendale. So I love when we have meetings at the Glendale Service Center because I can just, it's an easy commute. But I have to commend, I think that service center, I watch the interactions with our staff down there and you can just, the whole environment, it's so great to have a place for members to go it's professional. There's all the publications, there's friendly people to greet them and easy parking. All of our service centers, now that we've been to most of them with the offsites, are really easy to get to from the freeway. So I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness for our membership, because it's a lot to kind of find parking and figure out where to go. With the San Diego site, so the same kind of demographic analysis that you just walked us through, that's kind of
That's correct.
what you're doing right now to kind of inform the decision in terms of where in San Diego you'll be located. Okay, look forward to
Okay.
that.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Peggy. All righty. Ed, Peggy?
I have nothing to report. I'm sorry. I could make something up, but I
Wow.
have nothing to report.
No, that's good. That's good. That's right. Peggy, anything? All right, moving right along. Information requests.
I believe we had 2 information requests, and the first was related to the death benefits. We wanted the policy. And in that information request, you asked staff to include historical figures, including the costs of burial and cremation historically, and the difference between coverage A and coverage B.
Thank you.
And a legal analysis of the unfunded liability issue surrounding the death benefit.
All righty.
And the second information request I had was related to the Medicare premium payment program, and your question as to whether, if a selection was offered and someone had already retired, whether they'd be able to make that selection.
All righty. Our next item is our draft agenda. It is before our last 2 items. If you could peruse that really quickly, please. I can't think of anything, Ed, other than what we've already talked about. All righty?
Yeah, we'll just add the agenda item on the policy, right?
Yeah. All right, trans and charter school membership.
It's a consent item, so I'd be happy to answer if anybody had any questions about it.
Were there any questions on this? Our last 2 items are both consent. The trans and charter school membership and the approval of the minutes. Are there any questions or corrections on any of those? Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
It's been moved by Paul, seconded by Joy. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Thank you very much, Ed, for getting us the information on the trends in the charter schools. Appreciate that. Carrie?
Before we adjourn the committee meeting, Madam Chair, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Peggy Plett for her extraordinary leadership that she's brought to Cal STRS. Your leadership has been exemplary. You've done so much to transform the member benefits department in the years that I've been on the board, Peggy. And as a result, you've made a positive impact in the lives of the people that we represent, the educators of the state of California. You will not be easily replaced. You will be deeply missed, but Jack has informed us that you and your husband have plenty of plans.
You're going to stay busy.
So tomorrow night we'll be honoring you at dinner. We will be honoring you. So on behalf of our board, on behalf of the educators of the state of California, thank you for your extraordinary leadership to Cal STRS, our members, and the organization. You've done an exemplary job. Thank you very much.
Amen.
If I may.
Absolutely. Because I can't.
I'm not sure I can either.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Well, you're going to have to wait then, Peggy. Go
I
ahead,
won't be there
John.
tomorrow. Even though I will miss it deeply, I have a speaking appearance. But you're just so thorough. You're so solid. You're so dependable. You're so incredible. And so I just wanted to let you know because I spent 8 years with the controller's office, now briefly in the treasurer's office. You're just a first-class employee. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I would just say that working at Cal STRS has been a very, very big privilege. It's been my opportunity to give back to a community of individuals who shaped not only my life, but the life of all of us around us. And that it is with gratitude and joy that I have been able to serve members of our system and compliment the work that they have done on behalf of California by seeing to the benefits that they're going to receive in their well-deserved retirement. So I appreciate the opportunity that CalSTRS has provided.
What's for dinner? What's for dinner tomorrow night?
And are you gonna send us pictures of your vacation?
And feel free to come back and visit anytime, Peggy.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Check in on us.
There's choices for dinner.
I heard.
We look forward to celebrating.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jen?
On behalf of the California Teachers Association, we just wanted to join the rest of the board on behalf of so many thousands of teachers that you have helped and educators. We can't thank you enough because there are so many times where we've called you and your team and had a lot of colorful conversations trying to figure out service credit for someone or different issues that we need to resolve. You have been so instrumental. I can't tell you how better and more secure you've made retirement for our members, and we are deeply appreciative. And you have such big shoes to fill, but we really want to say thank you, and we're really going to miss you.
Absolutely.
I first got to really know Peggy when we both drove together to Fairfield for a presentation. It was a wonderful experience, and I got to know a lady that has been very dear to my heart since then. She's really reorganized benefits and services and gotten the telephone tree to work so well. And Peggy, I just don't know what it's going to be like without you. We'll miss you.
Ed?
Yeah, Ed Foley from CTA, and he retired. I just wanted to say that as a new kid on the block, I went to client advisory, which I think really epitomizes the kind of outreach that this board does with their clients. And from the very first moment, I felt welcome. You and Ed are undeniably a tremendous team. And the other thing, too, I had some concerns, which is not unusual. and you took the time to talk to me and say, and try to give me some background on what was going on. And I really appreciated that because, you know, there's a tendency that, oh, okay, well, we've answered the question. Let's go on to the next subject. But you went beyond. We're going to miss that. And you are really a credit to representing one of the finest retirement systems, and we really appreciate you as a client. Thank you very much.
Any other statements from the public? Go ahead.
I have a comment that I'd like to make. It's a change in topic, but my name is Dave Davini, and I'm a retired school administrator. And I want to express some disappointment. And the disappointment has to do with the opportunity that you had or have to increase the lump sum death benefit. That is a benefit that goes to every member of STRS, active, inactive, retired. Any member who is vested will eventually receive that benefit. To not increase the benefit is to devalue the benefit. And I think that the benefit, when passed, was passed for good reason, was passed to give an opportunity for every member of this organization to have a benefit that would help them at the end of their career and at the end of their time of service. And so I ask you to consider and to grant the increase in that lump sum benefit.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate that. All righty. Seeing no other business before the committee, we will stand adjourned.